My fringe is getting way too long, so you're probably going to see me being like the whole video. Hi, hey, hello, how are you? Welcome to the channel. As you might know, oh my goodness, I start every video with as you may know, and I really need to make some sort of variation of that, okay? I need to expand my vocabulary. So you may have seen, see, that's better, okay. So you may have seen You on Netflix. The 3rd season came out like a month ago. And people tend to sympathize for Joe, the main character, even though he kills literally everybody. Everybody seems to love Joe. Along with a lot of people on the internet, I was wondering why does that happen? Because Joe, let's be real, okay? Joe is literally a serial killer. And if you think about that, it's actually quite strange why we sympathize for a character that literally kills other characters. And even more interesting is that a lot of people tend to hate on Love, the character Love, because she kills people. And that is so interesting because it seems like Joe does the same thing, right? They both kill people, but for some reason people are rooting for Joe but hating on Love. So I thought I would do a little analysis moment on why Joe is loved versus, I wanted to say versus Love is hated, but that didn't even make sense in my brain, so I couldn't get it out, and I was just stuck in thinking mode. So this is going to be a video analysis about why we root for Joe, but why we do not root for Love. Sorry, fellow film, television nerds, whatever you are, let's get into it. In this dress, I feel like one of those professors in 80s shows. I feel like a professor in a retro series who either kills people and nobody knows, or who gets killed in some episode or whatever. Okay, so when we analyze why a viewer feels the way the viewer feels, you usually look at the way the story is told. So you look at the narrative, because the narrative kind of controls how much information we get as a viewer and how information is told to us. And usually the narrative does push the viewer to sympathize for certain characters and to hate certain characters. Eventually, it's usually up to the viewer whether they like a character or not. Of course, you know, we all have our personal opinions, but usually the narrative does try to make certain characters more likable than others. Let's put it like that. So like a true university student I'm going to use an article written by Murray Smith or Murray Smith. I don't quite know how to pronounce his name. He wrote an article about the way sympathy is produced in shows. He calls it the structure of sympathy, and I'm going to use some of his terms to explain why we feel sympathy for Joe. Okay, the reason why we are interested in why we sympathize for Joe is because we usually do not align with his morals, okay? Usually, most of the time, people really do not agree with killing others for the sake of, anything, really. So the show really plays with your moral values and your ethics, because Joe does not follow the generally accepted moral code of not killing people when they are not convenient, you know? So there is something else in the show that makes you feel like what he is doing is somehow justified. There is something in this show that bends your moral code, since you kind of feel like what Joe is doing isn't that bad, that he has a point, as some people may say, you know? I've seen a lot of memes on the internet of people saying that they think Joe has a point when he is killing people. And I may think, what is this thing in the show that makes me rethink my values, or not even rethink them actively, but agree with something that you would usually not agree with, like murder, you know? And that has to do with, oh my goodness, my cat. What? No. Nina. She did this the last time I was filming in my room as well. And this has to do with the second component of the text that I wanted to discuss with you, which is alignment. Alignment is the process by which spectators are placed in relation to characters in terms of access to their actions and to what they know and feel. So this has to do with objective and subjective narration. Okay, so a plot might confine us wholly to information about what characters say and do. Here the narration is relatively objective. But when you hear sounds from a character's perspective or see things from a character's perspective, the narration is subjective. So in You, the narration is mostly subjective because we usually experience things through Joe, which usually already forms a bond between the viewer and the character because it makes the character the protagonist most of the time. But we as a viewer have so much access to Joe's subjectivity, and a big thing of this is the voiceovers. So if the narrative would be objective, we would not hear his thoughts in voiceover, we would not hear them, they would just see Joe killing people, and I think that will make a very big difference in whether we sympathize with him or not, because these voiceovers do something very special, okay? In Joe's voiceovers, he usually explains what he is doing or what he is going to do. As a viewer, we follow his thought process, so when he thinks of maybe having to kill another character, we usually experience that thought process with him. He takes us through it very fast, and when he comes to his conclusion, he really builds up argumentation as to why he has to do what he does. So we could basically see the voiceovers of Joe, the character giving us arguments as to why he has to do what he does. Because he usually tries to convince himself of what he has to do, but in that process he also convinces us, the viewer, because we listen to that with him. And usually how he motivates his actions is through a thing that we call false dilemmas, okay? This is something I learned about in high school. I was very impressed that I still knew about this. False dilemma is a way of argumentation that is usually seen as, incompetent, not a good way of building up arguments. In a false dilemma, you usually give two choices as if they're your only choices. So you create a dilemma that is not actually a dilemma, hence the name false dilemma. And Joe does this a lot because usually he is going to decide whether he should kill a person or not, okay? Let's just simplify it like that. In that, he already creates this false dilemma because he sees his only two options as having to kill a person or letting them live. And he never really thinks about the possibility of doing something else. So this false dilemma between killing or not killing is already established within the first part of his argumentation, and then he builds from there. As a viewer, you are not actively thinking about his arguments. You're not really thinking about whether his argumentation is correct, is not correct, whether it's built up in a logical way, which usually leads you to just agree with him at the end. That is what makes people think, oh, that makes sense, because he already implements the idea in your head that the only two options are to kill or not to kill, okay? You as a viewer also start to adopt that mindset when it comes to the show. Not in real life, okay? I'm not saying the show is turning us into killers or whatever, but in the show. So then it's easier for the viewer to think, wait a minute, he has a point. Maybe he should kill that person. I really hope this makes sense. Another component that adds to the subjective narration and which adds to why we feel sympathy for Joe is spatial attachment. Spatial attachment concerns the capacity of narration to restrict itself to the actions of one or more characters. We are usually spatially attached to Joe. We usually follow what he does. We follow what happens to him. We see things from his perspective because there are also a lot of shots from his perspective. And this, in combination with the voiceover, makes it so much easier for the viewer to just sympathize with him. Because, for instance, we are not as spatially attached to Love, but I'm going to get into that later. But just so you know, we do not follow Love around that much. We usually follow around Joe. And this combination of factors which make the narration mostly subjective causes us, the viewer, to just easily align with his character. But of course, one could argue some narrations are also subjective and you're also, going along with a character and you still hate them. And I get that. That is also a thing. So, in order to build my case a little more, I have another argument for you, okay? You thought I ran out of them? Another reason why we sympathise for Joe, which also has to do with subjectivity, is his backstory. Especially in season 3, we learn a lot about Joe in his youth, okay? We learn a lot about why he is the way he is today because we see flashbacks of his youth, and this already started in season 2 or 1, I'm not quite sure on which season it started, when we saw him kill one of his mother's boyfriends. But these flashbacks create a sense of sympathy because we see Joe as this little kid who cannot control what is happening, who had a very bad childhood. So we see Joe as this little child who gets bullied, who gets left by his mom. We see him in all these terrible situations that we usually feel sorry for if someone, gets in them. So we already feel sympathy for little Joe since we understand why Joe is the way he is and why he does the things he does. It is a lot easier to sympathize with his character. Understanding a character is very important for having sympathy for him because then you can identify with the character more. Then you can think, wait a minute, I also went through some hard shit. I also went through a bad childhood, You can sympathize with him because you understand where he comes from and because you can identify with parts of his character. And another thing that I want to say, which is a small thing, but I also really want to say because it is helping with forming sympathy for his character, is that we never really see the consequences of his murders that much. We don't really see the emotional impact Joe's murders have on other characters or on their families or whatever. Because we are so restricted to Joe and we are spatially attached to him, we don't really see the consequences of his murders on other people. So it's a lot easier to sympathize with Joe because we do see his actions and we do see where he comes from and we do see what he is doing and how he is handling things, and we do feel his emotions, but we do not feel the emotions of other characters or hear their thoughts or see where they're coming from or see what the effect of Joe's actions is on them, okay? So that was this part. Let's get into the part why we don't feel the same emotions for Love. we kind of push our morals aside or bend them slightly for Joe's character, but we don't seem to do that for Love's character. So this part is about why that is the case. And spoiler alert, it has to do with the subjective narration again. Because we don't really have the same access to Love's character. We have way more access to Joe's character. So that makes our feelings of connection with Love's character so much less, which, in return makes us feel less sympathy for her. But let's get into the terms that I used for Joe as well, so we can kind of, go by point, systematically, one may say. Okay, so first off, subjective access. So we have access to Joe's thoughts through the voiceover. That is subjective access. I don't know if I said that before. We don't have the same amount of it to Love's character. I believe we hear her voiceover 2 times in this season in 2 sequences. One when she's at her mom's event, and one when she has Sherry and what was his name? Carrie locked in her cage in her bakery. And there's a very important difference between Joe's voiceovers and Love's voiceovers. Apart from Love's voiceovers being way more sparse, thus way less important, there's also the thing that Love's voiceovers do not have the same structure as Joe's voiceovers. Joe's voiceovers, they usually justify his actions. They usually present him thinking about things. They present him as a character who tries to be a better man, who is thinking about, wait, I should do this better. Or, he's usually justifying his actions. This is way different when it comes to Love's character, because Love's character uses her voiceovers to express her anger, to express the hatred she feels, to express thinking about how she should get rid of the people locked in her cage, for instance. And I know we also hear hatred and anger in Joe's voiceovers, but that is very well mixed and combined with voiceovers that are about being in love with a person, caring in his way, in his special way for a person. There is a mix in his voiceovers between all those emotions, which balances them out. This is not the case when it comes to Love's voiceovers, because it's only one emotion that she usually expresses in those voiceovers, which is anger, and that can make a character look very bad in the eyes of a spectator. Well, hello there, editing Inci here. I also quickly want to say that misogyny and casual sexism also play a role in why we don't like Love's character based on the voiceovers. This is the case because women are usually seen as more emotional than men, and these emotions are usually seen as less good, Think of the word hysterical, for instance, that's usually associated with women. So it's also the thing that Joe is being seen as this calm, cool communicator, while Love is seen as this hysterical character, while Joe has the same emotions as Love. So keep in mind that misogyny and sexism also can play roles in why I don't like Love, because the stereotypes regarding women and their emotions are also a thing, So thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of the video. So it's the way her voiceovers are portrayed, but not only that, it's also the lack of voiceovers, like I said before, but also the effect this lack has not only on our connection with the character, but also on the way we understand her actions. When it comes to Joe, we understand his actions through his voiceovers. We do not have the same thing when it comes to Love. We don't know she's going to kill Natalie with the axe in episode 1, because we did not have a build up to it when it comes to the voiceover. Joe always has a build up to his murders with voiceover. We don't have the same thing when it comes to Love. We do not see her thought process, we do not hear it, so we just see her kill people. My cat is leaning on a thing that, no, my cat is moving the camera, come on. Nina, I just want to, oh no. So we just start to assume that she kills people out of jealousy and out of impulsivity, because that is what Joe's voiceover is telling us. Joe's voiceover is such a big part of why we as a viewer are trained to not like Love's character. Joe's voiceover pins every little bad thing that happens on Love's character. That just happens. He does that throughout season 3. He portrays Love as this terrible person, as a monster, as a sociopath, as impulsive, jealous, when Joe is the exact same. Nina, why are you doing this? Okay, so let's get to spatial attachment now. Okay, so speaking of spatial I cannot take myself seriously right now. Now she's gonna attack the microphone. Stop, please. Just chill. Just chill for a second. Spatial attachment. So we are Nina, come on. Okay, so we are not spatially attached to Love. That's what I wanted to say. That's all I wanted to say. We are not spatially attached to her character most of the time. There are a couple of episodes and a couple of times when we are spatially attached to her character, but that's usually when she is murdering people, or when she's hitting people in the head, or when she is planting murder evidence, or when... Nina! Stop attacking my microphone! So I think you see a running theme here. Usually when we are spatially attached to love, nothing good happens. Nothing morally good or things that we usually see as good happen. And needless to say, that creates some sort of negative feelings towards Love's character. We don't really get the same backstory of Love's character as we get of Joe's character. Especially in season 3, because in season 2 we did see a little flashback of what she did and when she killed someone, blah blah blah. But in season 3 we do not see anything of this anymore. We only got that part of her childhood, and the rest of it is told to the viewer through conversations, through, her talking to 40 in season 2, But in season 3 we do not get the same information anymore. We do not see flashbacks of her youth. We do not see why her character became the character she became. But we don't get the same details as we get when it comes to Joe. Okay, so that was my little rant, my little chat talk about why we sympathise for Joe's character but why we do not sympathise for Love's character. Just remember the next time you're watching You that Joe's narration is really probably influencing you way more than you think, okay? And let's remember that both of these characters, Joe and Love, are seriously fucked up. Neither of them should have our sympathy. That's what makes it so interesting. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, don't forget to give it a like, comment down below. Please let me know what you thought of season 3 of You, because I thought it was so fucking interesting. Thank you again so much for watching. I love making analysis like this. I really love dissecting shows and movies and all that stuff. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next one. Peace.